Police procedurals, and stories like them, have been around since the late 1800s and have their roots in character-based mystery stories, like Sherlock Holmes and Hercule Poirot. However, at the advent of TV, the genre began to morph and change. Not only were realistic cop shows becoming popular, but a new kind of idea was taking shape. Twin Peaks and The X-Files left an undeniable mark on the television and media landscape in general. They act as modern horror stories, which always had a tendency to star exceptional individuals like doctors, lawyers, and, yes, investigators. Nowadays, speculative procedurals are everywhere and come in all shapes and sizes. Sleepy Hollow, Grimm, and even stuff like Supernatural and Riverdale have become ubiquitous and have garnered massive fan bases. That's why I think the story of this chapter will be somewhat familiar to all of you. It's not like any of the other chapters in the question arc, for several reasons that we'll get into very soon. It's an absolutely necessary addition to the story, however, as it slides several pieces of the mystery into place and is responsible for almost single-handedly setting up the rest of the visual novel. It is a transition, more than anything, a point where the questions being raised slow down, at least a little, and very slowly, we start getting some answers. Are you finally ready to begin? Has your brain been melted by the complications this game has presented so far? Well, it only gets worse from here. Somehow. My name is Hedgehog, welcome back to This Nonsense, and this is Higurashi. Like I mentioned before, Chapter 4 is a very different beast than the other three we've looked at so far. For one, Himatsubushi-hen, or time-wasting chapter, is ironically much shorter than any of the others, featuring only 6 chapters instead of the usual 12 to 13. Originally, it wasn't even a part of the main canon, beginning life as a simple side story. However, Ryokishi then realized just how important it was to the mystery as a whole and dubbed it the 4th question arc. It tells the story of Mamoru Akasaka, a police detective who journeys down to Hinamizawa from Tokyo back in 1978. Yes, you heard me. We are not in the summer of 1983 this time. Akasaka is here to investigate the possible kidnapping of a certain VIP, the grandson of the Minister of Construction. We definitely heard this mentioned in both the 2nd and 3rd chapters. I love when a story comes together. Before we begin, a couple of notes like always. Like usual, special thanks goes out to all the voice actors who participated in this video. It's a rather different group than usual, but I hope you'll all send them kudos anyway. Also thanks to my associate editor CLaUD. I wish I could pay him to just do it all for me because my lord, am I tired. He edited the whole of the Rent a Girlfriend video, and if you think his stuff just looks better than mine, which it does, maybe consider checking out my Patreon. Link in the description is below. There's a lot of fun benefits to being a patron as well, so I don't know, could be fun. It's not like I want you to donate money to me or anything, but baka. And if you can't, that's no problem. That's what that little subscribe button is for. And the like button. And the comments section. Do it, please, to satiate our algorithm gods. Alright, time to cut to the chase already. I know you're all shivering in anticipation. So let's get into it. I'm ready if you are. Just get strapped in for a very different sort of ride this chapter. It begins, as always, with a word from the author. I now entrust you with all the mysteries hidden within Higurashi when they cry. However comical it may be, if you have reached any conjecture, then you have passed. This final novel is a meager reward for you. Conjecture is impossible. You have a right to reject this story. So this is even more cryptic than usual. I think it might have been written before it was decided this was to be a main chapter, as no, you really don't have a right to reject this one. In fact, this is one of the more important fragments of the puzzle. Anyway, our story begins at an airport on the way to Sapporo. Yes, like the beer.
My flight to Sapporo was still a bit later on. I still had over an hour before boarding. Well, I might as well close my eyes for a bit on the bench over there then.
So, the very first thing you might notice is that, the first-person narrator's voice is quite different. It's because I fired Dragon. I'm kidding. Though he is grateful for the break to rest his poor vocal cords after that last chapter. Yikes. This man is, like I mentioned before, Mamoru Akasaka, and even though he is a police officer, he's not traveling on business this time.
The reason behind this trip was to meet with an old friend. It was a bit strange to call him an old friend. In fact, it might have been better to call him a bad one.
Who's this bad boy you're talking about, huh?
His name was Kuroudo Oishi.
My disappointment is immeasurable and my day is ruined.
We met 7 years ago, in 1978. There was something I had to ask, to talk to him about concerning that time. That kidnapping. The details and resolution of which were resigned to darkness. Also, it was impossible not to recall a certain mysterious girl.
Step right up, welcome to my wheel of misfortune. Give us a roll, let's see which girl is the main torture victim of the hour. Who's it gonna be? Who's it gonna be? This is a very interesting beginning, I think, and really shows just how much Ryokishi is starting to experiment with writing styles. The first 2 chapters opened in a fairly straightforward manner with Keiichi's narration. Chapter 3 opened with a third-person cold open, and now this chapter is opening with a framing device. A very clever idea, especially if you're going to be following events that happen before the main bulk of the story. I'm always a big fan of easing readers into a story, letting them just dip their toes in instead of trying to throw them in the deep end. It's a good way to build tension and begin positing questions. I told you a little bit more about this chapter up front than the game does, but I certainly didn't tell you that it was going to involve Oishi so heavily. We then cut away to a different time, the summer of 1978, which the text helpfully reminds us. It's really off-putting, this background, actually, because it looks so similar to the one from Hinamizawa, but the walls are a different color. This could be because it's a much older time period than we're used to, but the teacher is noticeably not Chie-sensei, so I think this is supposed to be a different school altogether. Could have potentially made that clearer with an entirely different background, but this classroom never comes up again, so I can see why they wouldn't want to waste resources on it. The school day is over, and all of the children run, finally free of the stifling, hot classroom. Children, returning home from school, split off one by one from their groups of friends. Even though there were several of them in a group as they left the school, as they got closer to their homes, their numbers dwindled. In a scenario like this, there must always be one kid whose home is further away from the others. He waves goodbye to his friends. Yeah, see you tomorrow! Only to be confronted with something out of the ordinary. A white van is parked at a quiet corner, with its windows open and the radio on.
Due to the protests against the Hinamizawa Dam project resulting in bloodshed when clashing with riot police last month, things have only become more violent. Last week there was also a direct confrontation with Minister Inukai on the steps of the Ministry of Construction.
As the boy passes it, the driver takes notice of him. He says a few words into his radio and steps out of the van. The man spies the name on the boy's name tag, Toshiki Inukai, the same last name as the Minister of Construction. We interrupt this tense scene to bring you the same stock phone sound we've heard for the last 3 chapters, but this time it's coming from the phone in the office of a very important man. He picks up the phone, only to be greeted with silence. Finally, after a long period, a strange voice responds.
You didn't say who you were, so I was anxious. If you're not Minister Inukai, please hang up right away.
Yeah, so we can already see where this is going, I'm sure. The minister hesitates to confirm his identity, but as soon as he does...
Right now, you're sitting in your chair talking on the phone, yes? Then, why don't you try opening the lower drawer to your right?
After more belligerence, the caller has to threaten him to get the minister to open his drawer, and when he does, he can't quite believe what he's seeing. Because there, resting on top of the folders, is a name tag. Whose name tag? Toshiki Inukai. Another screen wipe later, and we're whisked away to a hospital room. This is all going a little fast, huh? Put a pin in this because we're definitely going to talk about the pacing of this chapter later. For now, it seems that we might be back in good old Akasaka's brain.
Do you remember Yukie? This picture. This is where I first proposed to you. That brief moment before you nodded back. You probably wouldn't know just how much it seemed like an eternity to me.
Yes, I never would have thought that amount of time could feel like an eternity, compared to how long I had to wait for you to propose to me. Akasaka is sitting beside his wife's hospital bed. Don't worry, it's not sad. She's just very pregnant. Unfortunately, as much as he just wants to spend time with her before she enters labor, which could be any day now, he has some bad news for her.
Sorry, it looks like an annoying bit of work has come up. In the worst case, I might not be able to be there for the delivery.
Yukie is an angel of a wife, however. Even if it makes her a little sad, she tells him to go, and when he bumps into his father-in-law on the way out, the old man explains that Yukie would feel worse about holding him back than being apart from him for a little while. With both their blessings, Akasaka heads off to a meeting.
To call a rookie like me, and on top of that, one who's off duty, it seemed like the section chief was calling for all hands on deck.
Must be something pretty serious. So serious, in fact, that Akasaka is instructed to close the blinds in the meeting room, which is something that is only done when the topic is really serious. Of course, I'm sure you've already figured out why they're meeting. Based on info they've gathered, it seems that the Minister of Construction's grandson has been kidnapped, although it seems like even the minister himself hasn't admitted to it. You might be wondering, then, how the police have this info. Well, keep in mind that Akasaka is technically an investigator for the Public Safety Division, so he's actually closer to an FBI agent than a cop. So, of course, they've just been spying on this dude's house. They've had it under surveillance. The agents in the room are nervous because the kidnappers must really have a lot of sway at their disposal if the minister didn't tell the police. Of course, the PSD is concerned that this kidnapping might have some political motivation behind it, and if word got out, it might collapse the whole Japanese government, which could mean that the communists might take over. Oh no, whatever shall we do? Capitalism can't fail us now. So it's up to the PSD to examine every major faction that might be responsible, no matter how remote the possibility, and put an end to the incident as quickly as possible. Akasaka gets assigned to look into the environmental groups on their list, specifically, and who could have ever seen this coming, the Hinamizawa anti-dam movement. To that end, he's going to have to go to Hinamizawa personally.
I didn't want to take a business trip when my wife was about to give birth. Even if I was a little busy, as long as I was in Tokyo, I could head to the hospital right away. On assignment, though, that would be difficult.
He knows that she'll forgive him, but his fragile male ego, TM, wishes that she'd at least try to stop him. This is really something he says, but I have no idea what that means.
Sorry, Yukie. I don't mind if you always complain to our child that their father couldn't come to the hospital when they were born because he was too busy with work.
The next day, Akasaka takes a train all the way out to the XX prefecture, which is where Hinamizawa is. That's an odd name for a prefecture. It's almost as if it's a statement towards the effect that this could happen anywhere in Japan. Luckily, here in the good old US of A, we don't have no pansy prefectures, so this could never happen to me. It's a long way out, and he spends most of his travel time reviewing his notes about Hinamizawa and the anti-dam movement. They're actually finally given a proper name here, the Onigafuchi Guardians. The only reason that this particular group are even on the list of suspects for the kidnapping is because they made a direct appeal to the Minister of Construction just the other day. This is the reason that Akasaka, a rookie agent, was given this assignment, because nobody thinks they're capable of something like this. Akasaka makes it to the prefecture and immediately heads over to the local public safety office. There he's given a nice cup of tea and handed a big stack of documents about the OG. Most of the information Akasaka learns here is stuff we already knew. The protests started out relatively peaceful but have recently turned more intense and violent. Among all of the law-breaking actions they've taken, kidnapping a child doesn't seem too out of character, especially since they apparently have both local government and Yakuza backing. Now, that explanation took me about 10 seconds to give you. Even if Akasaka isn't quite aware of how big a problem the OG is, we certainly are. The actual text of the story, however, goes on and on and on about this, going into the specifics of everything about the group in question. This is all very interesting information, of course, and ultimately most of it is important for us to know, but I think it was a slight misstep to front-load it all into the first section of the chapter like this. After the high-intensity intro, this just feels like deflating a balloon. Between the initial PSD talk, this discussion, and one or two more that will take place before the end of this chapter, there's a lot of very sudden info to take in, a lot of which we either already sort of know or don't really need to know until a little later. By giving this chapter one or two additional breakpoints, for instance, moving a conversation that Akasaka and Yukie have over the phone in one of the tips into the main narrative, and maybe moving a bit of the intro into chapter 2, it could really even this whole thing out. It's not a death knell for the story, as I sincerely doubt anyone who's made it all the way to chapter 4 will really drop it, but the sudden shift in perspective, topic, and tone, in addition to being given a lot of information really quickly, really kills the initial drive this chapter wants to present. As we get further along, certain developments will cause our investment to grow once again, but it's definitely a bit jarring to go from madness-inducing horror in the last chapter to intrigue and conspiracies in this chapter. There's probably a better way that could have been transitioned into. However, we have to remember that this chapter was not originally supposed to go here, and though it's very necessary, as we'll see, chapter 3 transitions much better into chapter 5 because of it. Chapter 4 is definitely the black sheep of the question arcs and much more indicative of where the story is going than where it's currently at. This is not the end of the info dumping that will occur throughout the series, however, in the future it's handled in a much more interesting fashion, let's put it that way. There is one interesting thing that the chief mentions to Akasaka, something that he might not really find all that important, but we certainly do. Apparently, the damn protesters have been getting away with so much because the villagers in Hinamizawa have come up with a perfect system. They give each other alibis. So if you got stabbed in the village and you knew the name and face of the person who did it, everyone else would improv off each other and claim that the person was somewhere else, doing something else, the entire time. You might also be wondering why this is important. I know it's been a little while, but think back with me briefly. Haven't we seen something like this happen before? Didn't Keiichi's classmates insist that he was at the Watanagashi festival when he was really murdering Teppei Hojo back in chapter 3?
As I threw away my humanity, turned into a demon, and was busy beating Satoko's uncle to death, I was having a great time at the festival last night.
The reason they can get away with this? Like I said, they have local government backing. Most of the names on the list of government officials and other prominent citizens share the same last name, Sonozaki. So they have official backing and also muscle, considering that Mion's father is the head of a Yakuza group. Akasaka is very quickly becoming concerned.
This Onigafuchi Guardians, in order to halt the dam project, do you think they could, say, threaten somebody important to accomplish this?
Oh, by the way, just in case you were wondering, Akasaka can't tell the local police why he's here, as that would be a breach of confidentiality. All anyone else knows is that he's here to investigate the OG. The chief says that it's very possible.
Sorry, Yukie. It seemed like my work wouldn't end so simply after all.
A little disheartened, especially at the news from his own chief back in Tokyo that little progress has been made, Akasaka makes the trek out to the Okinomiya Police Department. As he puts it,
the Okinomiya police station was right on the front lines.
While talking to the chief there are a lot of police chiefs in this first chapter, a certain detective happens to overhear them.
I was wondering what you guys were talking about.
So, in the past, I've always been very excited for the boy to be back, but I don't know. After that last chapter, we've learned that he can be kind of an asshole. So, which Oishi are we going to get this chapter? The best ally you could ever have from the first one, the driven, pragmatic one from the second, or the raging asshole from the third? And above all else, now that we're not being forced into the perspective of an admittingly paranoid teenager, are we going to get a glimpse of the true Oishi this chapter? The chief introduces Akasaka as an inspector, which embarrasses him.
An inspector? I'm still a rookie. My name is Akasaka. Pleased to meet you.
It must be nice to be so fresh-faced. Did they hire you this year?
I couldn't help but think I was being ridiculed, so I only responded with a forced smile.
See, this is what happens when the turbo virgin Akasaka meets the majesty that is the Giga Chad Oishi. The lesser male simply cannot stand up to the greater male's dominance. Why did I do this bit? This is stupid? The police officers continue to make fun of his pansy ass for having memorized, mostly, the list of OG executives, and it turns out that Oishi is, of course, familiar with the case as well.
I didn't mean to make fun of you. To make up for it, why don't I show you around the village? In the end, the Onigafuchi Guardians is nothing more than an alias Hinamizawa is using to deal with the outside world. I think getting to know the village would speed up your work.
Akasaka accepts his offer, and after donning a disguise of sunglasses and a surgical mask, can't be getting that coof right before your baby's born, the two set out in Akasaka's borrowed car towards the village. On the way, Oishi catches Akasaka up to speed with a lot of the info that we already know about the three great families of Hinamizawa, but before he gets too far into it, they are stopped abruptly by a barricade. One manned by people wielding banners that say stuff like, "Protect the village from the unethical dam," and "Fear the wrath of Oyashiro-sama's curse."
It was as though where the road just changed was a border with a different country.
They try to block their entrance into the village, but as soon as they recognize Oishi, they let them pass. Allegedly, the roadblock is set up to prevent illegal dumping.
Illegal dumping? Like corrupt contractors just tossing industrial waste away?
The line of argument is that if the police aren't going to do anything about it, they'll take matters into their own hands. Well, the industrial waste is just something they're doing by themselves, anyway.
By themselves?
They have a pretty good strategy. You see, in order to hinder construction, they've spread industrial waste over by the dam site. Then, blaming it on corrupt contractors, they start instituting these inspections. There, they stop every construction vehicle coming through and interfere with them as much as possible.
It almost feels as if we've wandered into a civil war in the Middle East.
That's a good way of putting it. You see, this here's a war zone.
The most interesting part of this chapter so far is getting to see Hinamizawa during the protests. We've heard a lot about them, of course, from Mion and Oishi and various other characters, but Mion always tried to make the village look as good as possible, and Oishi always downplayed their actions to keep Keiichi calm. Now, seeing them act more as a paramilitary group than a residential protest, it's probably hitting you, just as it is Akasaka, that the OG is nothing to sneer at. In fact, they're pretty terrifying. After passing the blockade, Oishi drives past the Kimiyoshi house and finally is able to properly explain the deal with the three families. We already know most of this, but it's always been through whispers and implications. He tells that the Kimiyoshis, while outwardly the leaders of the village, are just pawns, and that the Furude family is nearly extinct. Further down the road, they pass the shrine, though they can't go up there because it's technically the Furude family's property, and police are the last things they want there right now. Finally, they get to a certain property, and Akasaka says that this must be the location of the secret shadow leaders of the village.
Beyond here is one of the three families, the Sonozaki family. They're the ones controlling Hinamizawa from the shadows. The current head of the Sonozaki family is an old lady named Oreo. She has enough clout that you could call her Empress Sonozaki.
In other words, that would make her the actual leader of the Onigashima Guardians, right?
You got it!
Oishi stops the car and pulls out a cigarette. Keep in mind that Akasaka still hasn't told anyone exactly why he's here, but we know Oishi. He's one smart cookie.
You came all the way from Tokyo to investigate this, didn't you? Is it related to that direct appeal incident with Minister Inukai?
Akasaka confirms,
like a liar,
that he is absolutely here because that meeting put the group on a watch list. For sure. Nothing else. Don't worry about it.
That's a lie, isn't it?
He lets that sit for ages, using much the same techniques he did on Keiichi, just sitting and letting Akasaka stew. Unfortunately, Akasaka isn't a squirmy kid, and he doesn't give him anything. Yet his silence still gives away the fact that he's lying. As they drive back out of town, Oishi mentions how much of a shame it is that he won't say anything, because Oishi could really help him out, find him an informant, stuff like that. Akasaka is slowly getting some respect for the man.
We were always taught, however, that the rank-and-file police were no better than monkeys. We looked down on them like they'd run their mouth off in a drunken stupor. Oishi was an outlaw, even amongst them. And here I was, lost on whether or not I should tell him about the kidnapping of the minister's grandson.
Of course, there's one more thing to consider. Why is Oishi so concerned about helping him?
Well, it's not like I'm completely without an ulterior motive. As I recall, you guys have space in your budget allocated to pay informants, right?
Ah, there it is. Oishi is sly, really sly. Look at this fucker, look at him go. Akasaka, being a noob, agrees to pay him, but most of that money needs to go to the informant, okay? Sure thing, sure thing. So Akasaka gives him the money and tells him about the incident involving the minister. Oishi listens carefully, and when Akasaka asks him if he thinks it's possible for the OG to be behind it, Oishi hems and haws for a minute before responding strangely.
This was before the Meiji era, you see. This area wasn't named Hinamizawa Village back then. It was called Onigafuchi.
Of course, even if Akasaka doesn't know where this is going, we do. Oishi tells him about the legends of the man-eating demons and about being demoned away. He then brushes it off as superstition, but it gets Akasaka thinking.
The man-eating demons, as a price for violating the sanctity of their village, kidnapped the minister's grandson and swallowed him whole. It was so absurd, I was half disgusted with myself. Oishi was just teasing me. Come to think of it, by then I may have been already seized by the curse of that dubious village. For me to realize that would take a little more time.
In between sections, we get a couple of important tips. One is a simple phone conversation between Akasaka and Yukie, in which she pokes fun at him and he gets all embarrassed. It's cute. We also get several cutaways to our kidnap victim. Right now he's being driven somewhere in the trunk of a car. We'll have more Toshiki Inukai updates for you later. In the
The world is filled with people blessed with relationships. It's quite possible that a single remarkable event could have massive consequences inside a small community.
Nap time, we pick up the next morning with Akasaka getting ready to do some investigating. The OG has implemented several different methods for fighting the dam. The more aggressive one we got acquainted with yesterday, but the villagers have also put a lot of effort into creating positive PR for the general public.
The latter, peaceful route, stressed how precious the natural surroundings of Hinamizawa was, seeking people who would oppose the dam on environmental grounds.
To that end, they've created a series of nature and village tours for visitors, and so Akasaka goes undercover to participate in one. On the phone with a village official, it doesn't seem like there's any sign up for future tours, until, that is, the man realizes he's a private civilian with no ulterior motive to be there. He then bends over backwards to allow Akasaka to come to the village.
Somebody would come and meet me at the bus stop in the village. After showing me around a spot I'd take interest in, there was no doubt they'd bring me to somewhere like an anti-dam information center. Then, over a cup of tea, they'd try to indoctrinate me into accepting their principles and beliefs.
Well, when you put it that way, that sounds kinda... yeesh. Akasaka takes the bus, which is soon to be discontinued since, Hinamizawa was gonna be underwater. His car is already associated with the police, after all. As soon as he exits the bus, Akasaka becomes aware of the fact that for the first time, he is alone in enemy territory. Of course, to the residents of Hinamizawa, he's just a normal tourist.
But if by some mistake my true identity was to be exposed, it brought back the terrifying words I had heard at the prefectural office. That if somebody was attacked in Hinamizawa with a knife, there wouldn't be any evidence left behind.
Akasaka is confident that he looks just like a tourist, but when he looks back up at the bus...
All of the passengers by the window were staring down at me silently. Countless stares rained down like needles on me from the windows open to air out the bus.
They're telling him that he's an outsider, to go back to Tokyo. The bus takes off, and Akasaka desperately tries to calm his nerves. Nobody's there to pick him up yet, so he decides to wait in the little bus stop shed. The walls are plastered, like everything else, with damn propaganda. It doesn't help Akasaka's nerves. However...
Inside that uneasy space was a girl.
Oh shit. Oh fuck. I mean, we had to know this chapter would be about her because Rika's the only one who hasn't had a chapter about her yet, but also she's on the cover, Chief. She's sleeping, and Akasaka muses over the fact that she looks just like what he envisioned he and Yukie's ideal child to look like, with a few minor differences.
She had an immaculate, a divine air about her.
Rika awakens, and of course, upon seeing Akasaka, she does what a Rika does.
Meep.
I thought it was just one of those greetings kids do. So in order to prove I wasn't a suspicious person, I responded in kind. Meep?
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 Rika stares at him for a good minute, but as soon as he starts to worry that she might think he's suspicious, she smiles.
Neepa.
Neepa?
This goes on for a little while. Just then, a car arrives. The man inside is named Makino, who Akasaka notes is one of the names on the leaders of the OG list. OG list. He hurries him along, as the weather makes it look like it might rain soon. Akasaka hurries over to the car.
Makino, is it okay if I come along too?
My god, she speaks! Makino tries to protest, but what Rika wants, Rika gets, so she hops in the car as well. Akasaka thinks that she's absolutely adorable.
I want this girl to call me Papa. No. Father. Dad. Daddy. What am I doing? No. It was written in that guide to raising a child that you shouldn't dote on them. I'm definitely going to be a terrible father.
As they take off, Rika introduces herself properly.
My name is Rika Furude. I can already do addition in the tens digit.
They run around town, and Akasaka takes a bunch of pictures, a couple of which Rika gets in on. Finally, they go to the Furude shrine, so that Makino can show Akasaka the best view in town.
Well then, I'll introduce you to my home, Akasaka.
This manages to break through Akasaka's days of daddy daydreams, and he realizes that Rika is a Furude, the daughter of one of the three families. In the parking lot of the shrine, Makino notices Akasaka looking at the damn protest vehicles parked there and asks him his opinion on the whole matter. Rika doesn't quite understand what he's saying, though, so he explains it in terms he thinks she, and us, because I'm a dumbass, might understand better.
Japan is a peaceful country, so you should argue your point in a peaceful manner.
Makino counters him, however, asking how he thinks they should keep their village from being flooded, and Akasaka realizes that he's kind of put his foot in his mouth. I don't know how he managed to bend like that, but good for him, I guess. In principle, Akasaka is right, of course, but the reality of the situation here in Hinamizawa is a lot more complicated than that. I think the same thing is true of a lot of things in the real world. Akasaka apologizes for saying something so insensitive, but Makino laughs it off. They walk up to the shrine to see the lookout point, and Akasaka is a little disappointed by how ramshackle the OG's headquarters look. But they quickly move on to the view, and Akasaka is so stunned by it that he even forgets to take any pictures.
This is my favorite spot.
I just can't believe that this village is going to end up at the bottom of a lake.
It won't sink. The dam project will definitely go away.
It'll be gone soon? What makes you say that?
Well, you see, it's already been decided.
Okay, at first Akasaka was just humoring her, but now it seems like she might actually know something. But if the OG have enough power to just make it go away, then there's no need for them to exist at all, right? So, what's the deal? He asks her why she thinks that, and Rika struggles to come up with a satisfactory answer. Akasaka begins to get lost in thought about all of this when Rika gets his attention again.
What is it?
Go back to Tokyo.
Ah, this chapter was short, so I was wondering at what point things would start to get fucky. Word of warning for all of you out there that, like I said, this story's protagonist is not a mentally unstable high school kid, but rather a grown-ass police officer. It's not gonna hit the levels of fuckery that the previous chapters did, but that doesn't mean that we can't have a little spoop. As a treat.
You should definitely go back to Tokyo right away. If not, you will woefully regret it. That would be an incredibly pathetic thing to see. So, I thought I'd warn you right now.
Akasaka wonders if some other little girl has replaced Rika while he wasn't looking, but that can't be possible.
Who are you? You're not Rika-chan.
Akasaka is such a coward.
The girl who is not Rika makes to approach him, but suddenly trips on a rock and falls on her face.
Meep.
When she gets back up, she looks entirely normal again. Just then, someone calls the two of them to get some treats, and Rika looks back at Akasaka as he hesitates.
If Akasaka doesn't hurry up, I'll eat his share of manju too. They're steaming fresh. People who don't wash their hands aren't allowed to eat any manju.
Needless to say, Akasaka is extremely weirded out by all of this. He tries to ask Rika about it, but it seems that she doesn't
know what you're talking about. But
throughout the rest of his day, and the rest of his encounter with the residents of Hinamizawa, he can't stop thinking about it. But don't you think there's something a little strange about this? In the past, when characters started to act weird, they all acted weird in a very specific way. They always seemed to be mocking Keiichi, but only in backwards ways, only using normal language to imbue secret meanings. They never just called him a coward. And also, Rika didn't get the possession eyes that both Mion and Rena repeatedly acquire. If this is possession, it seems oddly dissimilar to that which we've seen in previous chapters. Meanwhile, off in Tipland, we get another Toshiki Inukai update. He's tied in a corner, gagged. Great! We also get to meet Mion's grandmother for the first time, as she's having an appointment with Dr. Irie. That's right, he's a character in this story. Anyway, chapter 3 starts.
The weather forecast had predicted that it wouldn't rain at all this entire week. But even then, there was occasionally a day where I was hoping that it would be wrong as I stared up into the clear blue sky. Was I being mischievous in hoping so?
With Akasaka talking to his superior over the phone, relaying everything he's learned so far, and coming to the conclusion that he still has no idea whether or not they could be capable of the kidnapping. After he hangs up, he lies back down on the bed, waiting for a call from Oishi. Right on time, the phone rings.
Well, this is a surprise, Akasaka-san. You're pretty quick to answer the phone. Are you a regular user of dating chat lines or something?
What a fucking weirdo. He then asks if Akasaka would like to join him at a strip joint. Damn it, man, you're not helping your case. He drops the jokes and tells Akasaka to meet him all the way out in Shishibone City, far away from the prying eyes of Hinamizawa.
Akasaka-san, over here! Did you get a little lost?
No, I'm sorry for being late.
Well then, shall we go to a place where we can get a drink?
Don't worry about it. I don't drink while I'm on the job.
Hey boy, how much did you give this guy? Looks like there was quite a bit skimmed off the top, you know.
Akasaka says that he took that into account, and both the other men realize just how much of a stiff he is. Those are my words, not his. Akasaka just calls himself serious. He then asks Oishi if he's already been drinking.
What's wrong with drinking while I'm off duty? Even if you're working, I'm not.
The informant introduces himself as Sato, which is probably a fake name, but who really cares? And the three of them make their way up to a shady second-level joint, which thankfully just turns out to be a pretty innocuous Mahjong parlor. An older man waves Oishi over from a table.
You're late, Kurado. I was thinking of going home.
They all sit down, and Akasaka realizes what's happening. They're all trying to sucker money out of the rookie to go to a cabaret. So he's going to need to beat them at Mahjong to get Sato to give him the info he needs in any sort of timely manner. Just as an FYI, I'm mostly going to skip over this section because I know fuck all about Mahjong. However, like most of the crazy game scenes, we've done a full dub of this one. Pop-up should have just happened, or for TV users, it's in the description. Go watch it! We had a fuck ton of fun recording it. But essentially, long story short, it turns out that Akasaka is actually a Mahjong god, and the only reason he no longer plays is because Yukie asked him to stop. So even when Oishi and the old man try to cheat, Akasaka still kicks their asses. It's phenomenal.
Is he a Mahjong god? If not, he had to be the main character of a manga or something.
All the men at the table gain an enormous amount of respect for the kid they initially tagged as an easy mark, and everyone leaves the table as friends.
Still, when you were playing, boy, you were pretty into it. It was kind of scary.
I hear that a lot. I don't mean to change gears like that, though. Did I really look that scary?
Yup.
The table breaks up, and the old man makes to take off.
I'm going home to sleep. My body won't last like this.
Problems at work?
Oh, he's the foreman of the primary construction site at the Hinamizawa Dam. He's butting heads with the residents every day. It's rough business.
Oh my god. You guys, holy shit. I'm sure you've all realized the significance of this as well. This nameless old man is the victim of the first year of murders. And it turns out he's Oishi's Mahjong buddy? So, yeah, I think we might have a motive for why Oishi becomes so driven to find the ultimate culprit. This is only a hunch at this point, but the murder of a friend might explain why Oishi's so oddly persistent about the whole thing. For now, though, everyone's still having a good time. The old man takes off, and Oishi follows him, commenting that he didn't pay for Sato's information like Akasaka did.
Well then, Akasaka-san. Later. If you're having any trouble, you can count on me anytime.
I don't have any more money to pay you, you know that.
Okay. If you go easy on me next time, we'll be even.
Sato and Akasaka get into the former's car, and Sato drives around for a little while, making many left turns to make sure they're not being tailed by anyone. Eventually, they slip outside the city, and on a lightless country road, Sato begins to talk. Akasaka asks if he can confirm whether the OG is behind the kidnapping, but instead, Sato begins talking about something that seems unrelated.
Last night, the Sonozaki main house held a family council.
We are whisked away into a flashback where we see a room full of people all sitting on tatami mats, and all are turned towards an old lady laying in a futon. Even if she's become slightly infirm in her old age, she's still more than worthy of the title Empress Sonozaki. And sitting beside her is a very young Mion, her successor, of course. All around the room are various members of the three families. The small Furude and Kimiyoshi clans are here, but an overwhelming majority are a part of the Sonozaki family. The meeting is mostly about the amounts of money the OG is spending on their propaganda media campaign, which they are funding through essentially extorting the villagers, though they are calling it donations. However, even if it is draining their coffers, it is a very important expenditure, and Oryo Sonozaki has the final say, although it is actually Mion who speaks for her.
There will be no freeze on the price increase for the bulletin.
When the mayor Kimiyoshi protests, claiming that the people of Hinamizawa might no longer be able to front that bill, Mion continues.
And who on the inside would start that collapse? I'm asking who would be the first to buckle.
Even if she's just a little girl, Mion's words are proxy for Oryo, and thus the law, essentially. We've heard a lot about Mion's position as a successor in the past, but we've never really seen all that entails before.
The expenses related to the mass media will continue. If those expenses become too much, we'll have no choice but to continue the price hikes.
And so it shall be.
That's a rather old-fashioned family council, isn't it?
A young guy like you would probably find it hard to believe. In an antiquated place like this, these types of things have firm roots.
He continues. After that portion of the meeting concludes, a very scary-looking man approaches Mion and whispers something in her ear. Mion relays the info to Oreo, who begins to laugh. When asked to share with the class, she repeats a fact that we've been hearing since the start of the chapter. The Minister of Construction's grandson has been kidnapped. Akasaka is very concerned with how they came across this information. Oreo, while in no way confirming that the Sonozakis are responsible for the kidnapping, indirectly states it when she says that she wishes no harm to come to the boy, even if he's being kept in the Hinamizawa area. For Akasaka, this is a confirmation, but Sato isn't so sure.
Lad, you see, this is what the Sonozaki family always does. Let's say there was a particular problem, one that wasn't exactly favorable for the Sonozaki family. If Oreo shows concern over that particular problem, hearing that, somebody from the family council would be helpful. As a result, Oreo's wish would be granted.
It's a way of maintaining deniability, essentially. So even if someone from the Sonozaki family is responsible for the kidnapping, the Sonozaki house itself remains clean. So what this means is that there's a chance that the Sonozakis are responsible in some way, but there's also a chance that Oreo's just talking out of her ass. However, for Akasaka, the coincidences are starting to pile up. As a final warning, Sato tells him to be careful, and also informs him that the Sonozakis way ben know about an investigator from public safety coming down to investigate, so odds are they already know exactly who he is. Apparently at the meeting, Rika developed a great deal of interest in this one particular topic. Oh, yeah, by the way, she's been there this whole time, coloring in a book and sticking her feet under Oreo's blanket to keep them warm. When asked if she knows the man, she responds with a simple,
"I don't know,"
before burying herself fully in the futon. It seems like they're supposed to leave him alone for now, unless he starts causing trouble, but this causes Akasaka to realize something.
If the family council was the night before, then his cover was already blown before he even came to Hinamizawa.
And who was the first person who arrived to greet him? Only a certain Rika Furude. And under it all, her words of warning to go back to Tokyo are ringing in his ears. Once again, the tips prove vital to understanding this chapter, and this one might just be the most important of all. We find ourselves back in the Sonozaki mansion, where Oreo is deep in conversation with a couple of men in business suits. They're discussing the funeral of a family friend of some kind, a child who died too young. Oreo expresses deep concern and sadness.
You're really nice to other people, Granny. If Shion or I died, would you be this sad?
She responds that Mion shouldn't be stupid, but doesn't actually say one way or the other. The men take their leave, and Oreo sits in thought for a while. When Mion asks if she's going senile, Oreo begins talking about the minister's grandson. She says that this has acted as enough of a warning, and the Sonozaki should bring an end to this soon. Mion's face falls into a serious expression, and she leaves the room to go make an important phone call.
Hello? This is Mion. Yeah. Is my father there?
After that small detour, we are once more brought back to Akasaka's hotel room, where a phone call slowly wakes him up.
Akasaka-san? Good morning, it's Oishi. Could it be that you just woke up? I have another tidbit that might wake you up even more. There was something interesting mixed in with the lost and found at the Hinamizawa police box.
Akasaka is confused, but if Oishi is calling him this early in the morning, it must be important. He makes it to the Okinomiya police station, where Oishi pulls out something in a plastic bag.
Is that a wallet?
Indeed. There was small change inside, but no bills. We thought that a pickpocket threw it away after pulling out the contents. At first.
Akasaka thinks it would just be ridiculous if the initials T.I. were engraved on it. That would be so stupid, right? Well, he's right about one thing. It's not the initials that are on the wallet. The entire name Toshiki I is there.
We can't confirm from that this belongs to the minister's grandson.
But Oishi grins. He opens the wallet and hands Akasaka a card inside. It's a card from a dentist examination. It has the full name Toshiki Inukai on it and the location of the office. In Tokyo. After doing some mental calculations about how improbable it would be for a wallet from Tokyo to end up in Hinamizawa, Akasaka asks Oishi a couple of extra questions. Apparently, a random villager picked it up, and since it rained a week ago, it couldn't have been out there longer than 6 days. Besides a couple of people from the police box, nobody knows about this but Oishi and Akasaka. There's one final test to perform. Akasaka calls the dentist's office listed on the card, and they confirm. Yes, this is the Toshiki Inukai we've been looking for. He then calls the chief back in Tokyo, and they're going to send reinforcements by the end of the day. In the meantime, Akasaka is to investigate the area around which the wallet was found. Oishi explains with a map.
Around Takatsudo, apparently. This is Okinomiya. All the way over here, this is Hinamizawa. Then, even further upstream, way around here, is Takatsudo. It was deserted a long time ago. It's littered with abandoned houses, so it's really quite desolate around there.
Oishi-san, could I ask you to guide me to Takatsudo?
He of course agrees. Akasaka thinks to himself that an abandoned village would be the perfect place to keep a kidnapped child, so he wants somebody at his back. Also, he knows that his cover in Hinamizawa has been blown, and remember, he has no idea that this wallet was most likely dropped by the Sonozakis on purpose. He still thinks they'll try to oppose his retrieval of the boy.
Thank you very much for your cooperation. Honestly, I thought you'd ask for more money.
Well, if we're being honest, Hinamizawa isn't exactly a place I like to go to. Still, it's not a request I can refuse a friend that's played at the same table as me.
He takes his Mahjong very seriously. Before they leave, Oishi takes one further precaution. He reaches into the drawer of his desk and takes a stab-proof vest with him.
His name was Toshiki Inukai, the grandson of the Minister of Construction, Inukai. There was only one reason for him being here.
And apparently, we're pulled back out of Akasaka's perspective again. This broadening perspective is something that Ryukishi will begin to play with in several future chapters in several different ways. The method of switching to third person when leaving the main character's perspective is a pretty common method that a lot of visual novels use. Keep in mind that since most scenes in visual novels are from a first-person perspective, unlike in a movie, changing the POV character can be a pretty jarring experience, so using the shorthand of just telling us in context who we're following is easy, straightforward, and effective. Regardless, this is the first time that we've met Toshiki in the main story. All of the previous times we've seen him are in the tips, so for some readers this might be their first time meeting him. I have no idea why you would decide to skip reading extra information in a mystery story, unless you're me and the video is already way too long.
His grandfather had many enemies. He knew that he might personally catch some of that fallout, so he had to be twice as cautious. He was taught that by his parents.
Being blinded and gagged in a mystery location for probably about 2 or 3 days now, Toshiki has had a lot of time to think. Primarily, he thinks about escaping. At first, these are fantasies about him breaking free of his bonds and beating up the bad guys, as children are wont to do, but Toshiki's a smart kid, and eventually his mind turns to more realistic ways of obtaining freedom. He has one advantage in this situation. His kidnappers tried to plug his ears with a sponge-like material, but it's not very effective. He's been pretending that it is, however, so thinking that it's been working, he's heard a lot of information about the situation that the kidnappers think. He's been pretending that it is, however, so thinking that it's been working, he's heard a lot more information about the situation than the kidnappers think. He knows that they're out in the middle of nowhere, which means it'll be hard for him to escape.
He grew depressed and, after a little while, returned to his original scenario. However, as he played out those delusions in his head, his heart, hating to surrender, continued to search for a way to escape.
He realizes that he needs to find someone who will help him, someone who is not one of the kidnappers. How could he get in touch with someone like that?
If he faked being sick, then his captors would have to take him to the hospital, or bring a doctor to him.
The last thing they want is for him to die, after all, because then they lose their leverage on the minister. Luckily, Toshiki has had enough experience with illness to fake it. He was involved in a pretty major car accident the previous year and had to get surgery. He's still got a scar on his stomach from it. He holds his stomach and writhes. The captors quickly take notice, and the more he groans, the more anxious they get. They lift up his shirt to check his stomach, and they see the scar. Of course, complications from scars are no laughing matter, so the kidnappers panic. They decide to bring a doctor. Of course, I'm sure you can guess which doctor they're bringing. But that leaves a question. If Irie is the first person they jump to, they trust to bring back to their secret hideout that nobody knows, is he involved? Like, I guess he's Orio's doctor, but it's odd that they're putting this much trust in a third party. With all the highly successful Sonozaki relatives, not one of them is a doctor? They remove Toshiki's blindfold, and after a few minutes, the doctor arrives.
Who's he? He's not one of the kids from the village, is he?
The captors only threaten Irie a little at his questions, so he sighs and goes to analyze Toshiki.
Are you alright? I'm a doctor. When was the surgical scar from?
Last year. During the winter. From an accident.
Kids giving like an Oscar-worthy performance over here. What the fuck? Irie expresses his concern, but we don't see what conclusion he comes to as we cut back to what these other chucklefucks are up to. Akasaka and Oishi have just passed the barricade and made it into Hinamizawa proper. Even with his disguise increased with the addition of a baseball cap, Akasaka is sure that no one is buying it, and Oishi concurs. As they drive through town, Akasaka once more muses how beautiful Hinamizawa is, and what a shame that it's actually a horrible spider's web of the Sonozaki's making.
I couldn't deny that somewhere in the back of my mind I had ridiculed the thought. The villagers here wouldn't bat an eye at getting their hands dirty if it meant fighting the dam project. Even though a single shot hadn't been fired, this was a battlefield.
Oishi seems to notice his mood.
Akasaka-san, are you nervous?
Of course I am. We're headed into the heart of enemy territory alone, aren't we?
He expresses concern that something might happen to them out there, but because of the propensity of the villagers to close ranks, no one will ever know what happened to them. A pretty horrifying thought, all things considered.
I've left word that we're headed towards the Hinamizawa area. And in the worst case, we've also got a radio. I know you're scared, Akasaka-san, but it's not that easy to pull off the perfect crime. Well, of course it doesn't mean we can let our guards down, either.
He shows Akasaka the gun that he's brought. Guns are pretty hard to get a hold of in Japan, but of course police officers are allowed to carry. Akasaka expresses concern, as even though he has one as well, he's only ever fired it for training. Oishi confesses that he's never fired his either, and this lightens the mood. One of the main questions we came into this chapter with was about Oishi. Who is he really? What's his true motivation, and how much of what he does in various scenarios is an act? Now, of course, we can't get 100% confirmation on this without a third opinion, but based on his actions in this chapter, a couple of things are clear. Deep down, Oishi is a good guy. He might be kind of a prick, but he does genuinely care for the lives of the people around him, especially his friends. Obviously, the death of the old man, which will happen in the next year, probably changes him a little. It's clearly the reason, or at least one of the reasons, why he's so obsessed with solving the murders, though it seems his resentment for the Sonozakis is something that was already bubbling beneath the surface. The fact that Oishi has made me think so deeply about the psychology of one of its side characters is a testament to its character writing. Every person is woven so deeply into this plotline that it is incredibly difficult to untangle them. However, we can now see the beginning of it. At the very least, in this last question arc, we understand Oishi. We understand now that as long as the main cast doesn't get on his bad side, as long as they don't try to commit any murders themselves, we can trust him. It seems like it'd be pretty easy to avoid his bad side, all things considered, but here we are. On their way through, they have to pass the damn construction site, the front lines of the battlefield, as it were. People are shouting, propaganda trucks are playing sutras at an intense volume. It is madness.
Can't you do something about it with the noise ordinance laws?
A prefecture doesn't have any laws regarding noise ordinance. Also, those are sutras, right? We can't regulate religious activities. Those guys are pretty smart.
A group of protesters briefly blocks their car, and Oishi gets out to deal with them. As Akasaka is freaking out a little, he sees a shadow cross right in front of his window. When he turns, he sees it's a girl. Of course, it's Rika Furude. Akasaka tries to wave to her.
In spite of that, she simply stared down at me with a cold look on her face.
Oishi returns and the two take off, but Akasaka looks back. It seems to him like Rika muttered something as they passed.
Even though I warned you. What a fool.
Akasaka mulls over this until they get to Takatsudo. It's very abandoned. Apparently the only reason the wallet was found at all is because some of the villagers have a field up here and they happened to see it when they were passing by.
Everything about that story just seems a little too convenient.
Why, yes, it was planted by the Sonozakis for you to find, so yes it is! Actually, Oishi tells Akasaka just as much. It seems he's got a buddy who heard about that scene that we ourselves saw.
So, in essence, she gave the order to release the hostage.
I see it that way. The wallet being conveniently discovered was just a ploy to hand the boy over to the police.
But why would they release the hostage? Oishi thinks it's because they've already come to a deal with the Minister of Construction. That doesn't quite match up with the scene we saw, but with the Sonozakis you never really know. This once again reminds Akasaka of Rika and how sure she seemed that the dam project would go away, and he wonders if she knew about this all along. So he asks Oishi about her.
So, that little lady is, well, somewhat of a village mascot. She's beloved by everybody in the village. Some of the older folks worship her especially.
Worship?
Girls born in the Furude family have somewhat of a sacred implication, it seems. The living incarnation of Oyashiro-sama or something like that. Or so the story goes, apparently.
So, that's weird, right? We've been told that everybody loves Rika, but never that she's supposed to be the incarnation of Oyashiro-sama himself. Of course, Oishi doesn't really know much about it, so we're left with only that for now, but if she's directly related to the god, it could explain why her brand of weirdness is different than the others. Akasaka's reverie about the girl is interrupted, however, when the two run into something strange. Another car driving back the way they came. Oishi honks his horn a couple of times, and the driver pulls over.
Dr. Irie! Good afternoon!
Why, if it isn't Oishi-san, good afternoon. Fancy meeting you here.
Of course, we know exactly why Irie is here, and that it means the police officers are on the right track, even if they don't. Oishi asks him what he's doing out here, and Irie tries to cover by saying it's a house call. Even if he doesn't say, we know that Oishi doesn't buy that for a second.
I'll take my leave here. If I don't get back quickly, my staff will be angry with me.
Oishi lets him go, and drives on for a moment before coming to a stop. He pulls out a map and begins examining it. Akasaka asks if he thought the doctor was suspicious.
Didn't I say? There's hardly anybody that lives in the Takatsudo area.
And even if he was seeing someone who lived there, he was driving from the wrong direction. Oishi continues to drive, following the road that Irie came from, and in order to match the serious mood, it starts to rain. After a few minutes, they find it. A prefab shack with a car parked out front. Apparently it's usually used by the Forestry Service to store equipment, but the car out front definitely isn't a service vehicle.
Oishi was playing it cool, but my nervousness was gradually increasing.
Oishi radios in and requests backup if they don't call back in 5 minutes. After receiving confirmation, he and Akasaka approach the shack. Meanwhile, Toshiki Inukai watches his captors panicking as they see two cops approaching their hideout. One of them grabs Toshiki, who misses his opportunity to shout to the cops from indecision, and the other makes to delay them. Someone bangs violently on the door.
Excuse me! Hello! This is the police! Would you mind opening the door?
And this is where the fun begins. Now, I could take the next 10 to 15 minutes to describe the intricacies of this action scene, but frankly, I'd just be repeating what the story says, just in slightly less detail, so at that point, you might as well just read the chapter, because I'm never going to be able to convey the sheer excitement of just experiencing it for yourself. So, long story short, Oishi puts up a good fight against one of the captors before seemingly getting choked out. The other runs off with Toshiki, and Akasaka follows him. They have a tussle in the woods that goes on for way too long before the other captor shows up and pulls a gun on Akasaka, forcing him to his knees. Akasaka then does something very out of character and starts begging for his life. This gets the captors to let their guard down enough for Oishi, who has been waiting behind them for an opening, to disarm and render them helpless. He aims 2 guns at them, but before he can do anything, the men flee.
Those guys know their stuff.
What do you mean?
An officer won't fire at somebody who's fleeing. I want to keep my pension here.
They then turn to Toshiki, whom they have of course rescued, and he confirms his identity.
This is going to be a major incident. We probably only cut the tail off the lizard, though.
The fact that the Onigafuchi Guardians, or rather the Sonozaki family behind them, was pulling the strings was apparent, but proving it wouldn't be easy.
For now, they can only take satisfaction in the fact that they've accomplished their task. The little kid is safe. This enables Akasaka, who is actually quite wounded, to pass out in peace. Hold on, though. This can't be the end. There's still a good 20 minutes left on this video, so what gives, huh? Oh, my friend. This is where it finally gets interesting.
Hello? Are you okay? Don't try to get up. Just stay laying down, please.
Akasaka regains consciousness at the Irie clinic. After conversing with Irie briefly about his condition, they want to monitor him for the next day due to one of the assailants beating him over the head with a rock a bunch of times. He asks where Oishi is. Irie calls him in and leaves the room. After a few pleasantries, Akasaka starts asking him the important questions, like, did they find the perpetrators?
Unfortunately, no. They've probably already fled the prefecture, or are being hidden by the villagers.
What about the minister's grandson?
They're taking care of him at the station, but your colleagues from Tokyo are rather insistent that nothing be recorded.
You must think that public safety is a rather unseemly place, don't you?
No. We all work on the government's dime.
When we first met, I was somewhat prejudiced against Oishi, but now that feeling was gone completely.
Motherfucker! There it is again! That beautiful, beautiful feeling of being in exactly the same shoes as the protagonist. We were also a little biased against Oishi at the start of this chapter, remember? Especially after how he acted back in chapter 3. But goddamn if he didn't prove to be a downright swell guy. This is my final conclusion about Oishi. He's a really good actor. Obviously, he changes a little from the death of his friend, becomes much more driven and serious, but from his treatment of Keiichi in chapter 1, you can still see that goodness in him. He can be aggressive and angry and downright mean sometimes, but that's all an act to get what he wants. I don't think shoving muddy water in Keiichi's face was a great move, but we can now see that all the things he does are for good reason. He does change a little, however, as now, before any of the murders, Akasaka asks him if he's still going to continue his fight against the Sonozakis, and his response might shock you.
Nah, there's all sorts of dark rumors swirling around it, but it's not like I have a personal grudge. It'd be wise not to step on any toes here.
Finally, Oishi tells him that since he's been wounded, public safety is letting his colleagues handle the cleanup, and Akasaka is being recalled to Tokyo. Akasaka thanks Oishi for his help, and comments that at least the collaboration money didn't go to waste. Oishi admits bashfully that that was kind of supposed to be a joke. He pulls out some of the money Akasaka gave him earlier and tells him to go buy himself a drink and a souvenir. What a great guy. Of course, Akasaka's mind quickly turns back to Yukie, as now he can hopefully make it home in time for the birth. He wants to go back right this second to see her, but doctor's orders keeps him here for one more day. When he looks at the clock, he realizes that calling hours for the hospital are almost over, and he'd at least like to hear her voice. Oishi tells him about the phone in the lobby, and Akasaka rushes out in his hospital gown to give her a call. When he makes it, the lobby is pretty abandoned. It's getting late, after all. He finds the payphone and begins dialing the number for the hospital.
However, I felt that something was strange as I was dialing in the number. I don't know exactly how to put it, but it was as if the receiver was too quiet. That unique white noise from the telephone line wasn't there.
He hangs up the phone and tries dialing again, but still, it doesn't ring. He tries to get the help of the man at the counter, maybe a pharmacist, and the two examine the phone together. What they find is that the cord connecting the phone to the wall has been severed. The man offers to let him use the phone in the office, but Akasaka doesn't really want the hospital staff to hear his conversation, but a public payphone is okay. And the man tells him where the nearest payphone outside the hospital is.
I was dressed in a hospital gown. I was wearing sandals on my feet. No matter how you looked at it, I was not dressed to be wandering outside. But that's where the impetuousness of youth came in.
He runs down the road, probably not the best thing for his head injury, all things considered, and soon comes across the payphone.
Picking up the receiver, I slid a coin down the slot, but I felt that something was strange, just like at the hospital. Even after inserting the coin, the phone showed no response.
Once again, the phone line has been severed. So, here's where the horror has been hiding, I guess, including a dumbass worthy of a slasher movie. Akasaka approaches the lady in the nearby cigarette store and asks her where the next nearest payphone is. She directs him to one that is incredibly out of the way, but he still wants to talk to his wife, goddammit.
Sandals flapping as I ran, I couldn't help but laugh at myself. But having twice been foiled trying to call her, had I become hot-headed about it?
Yes, you dumbass. Don't go fucking wandering off in the middle of Hinamizawa. This is still enemy territory for you, remember? Luckily, he's not a complete dumbass, and Akasaka realizes that the cuts in the cords were too clean to be from wear and tear. Someone definitely cut them on purpose.
But who? And for what reason? The more I thought about it, the uneasier I felt, so I tried to push the thoughts aside.
He now finds himself pretty far removed from the village, on a dark, quiet road. He's just about to turn around and go back to the hospital when he sees a light ahead.
I had finally found it. It was a phone booth.
This time, he checks to see if the lines have been cut, and it feels fine to him. So he grabs the receiver. And, yeah, did you really think he was going to be able to make that phone call?
The receiver was light.
Whoever is doing this didn't even bother to be clever this time. They just outright cut the cord that connects the receiver to the phone.
It was all I could do to restrain myself as a raw and unpleasant feeling worked its way up the small of my back. It was a type of dread.
Just then, he hears the crunch of gravel. Someone is outside the phone booth. With a chill running down his spine, Akasaka leaves the safety of the phone booth and approaches the figure.
Injured people shouldn't be sneaking out of the hospital, right, Akasaka?
Did you do this to the phone cord?
She doesn't respond, which is frankly just as good as saying she did it.
Why?
There's nothing that can be done.
Huh?
Akasaka imagines that she must be talking about the hospital closing hours, which, it's true, it's most likely far too late to call Yukie now.
Even if you find another phone, it's too late.
He has no idea how she knows this, but ultimately, he gives up on being angry. He realizes how silly he's looked being so obsessed with calling her, and he decides to head back to the hospital. But he's not alone. Rika walks with him.
Is Rika-chan's house this way?
It is.
Won't your parents be mad that you're walking around alone at this hour?
Not really. My parents are busy today, so they probably forgot about me.
Akasaka encourages her to go home anyway, but she wants to continue talking to Akasaka. He almost turns in the wrong direction, but Rika takes him down a different way back to the hospital. They have a short conversation on the way, and Rika asks about his injuries, and he responds that he doesn't really know if they're bad yet.
The wounded shouldn't be sneaking out of the hospital.
People shouldn't be cutting phone cords.
Touche. Touche.
Rika-chan, you knew who I was. Right from the beginning, didn't you?
Rika doesn't respond to that, but she does nod.
But you still gave me lots of warnings. Then, I should probably thank you.
You probably should. I'm your savior.
It's a joke, of course, but there's still a rather heavy meaning behind it. As Akasaka looks around, he realizes that they're just passing the Furude shrine, Rika's home. For some reason, even this late at night, it's brightly lit up there. Akasaka asks Rika about it, but of course, the answer is obvious.
There's a festival today. The best and only festival in Hinamizawa. The Watanagashi Festival.
Rika asks if he wants to see it, and after a small hesitation, Akasaka lets her lead him up the shrine steps. After all, if everybody knows who he is anyway, then there's no point in hiding, especially if he's with Rika. The Watanagashi of 5 years past looks very different from the one we're used to. There's only like 3 pavilions, and it's mostly the old folks of the village sharing a few drinks.
It's a festival that's happened since long ago, but as you can see, it's not like it used to be.
I feel sorry for the deity being celebrated here.
Give this sorry excuse for a festival 5 or 6 more years, then everybody in the village will start coming.
I mean, she's not wrong, but wait. How does she know that?
What she said was not so much wishful thinking as it was telling of a future that had already been determined. She wasn't even predicting it. It was almost like she was simply reporting the results.
She leads him past the festival and up to the observation platform that they visited just the other day. As she looks down at the village, Akasaka is reminded of another prediction that she made, that the village would not be submerged by the dam. He asks if she already knew about the Minister of Construction and if he has in fact made a deal with the kidnappers. Rika doesn't respond, just looks at him. Akasaka goes back over the events, finding everything since finding the wallet strange. If the Sonozakis had put out the order to release the wallet, and therefore the child, why did the kidnappers put up such a fight? It could have been all an act to make the police's rescue look good, but even if Akasaka dismisses that thought, I'm not entirely convinced. Throughout this chapter, Akasaka has made a lot of assumptions about the situation he's in, some of which we already know to not be true. It's very interesting being put in a scenario where we know what's going on more than the main character does, and it really makes you wonder what assumptions Keiichi might have been making in the previous chapters, and which ones might have been incorrect, entirely without us knowing. Is Akasaka a reveal that every narrator in Higurashi is an unreliable one? Only time will tell, I guess. All I know is he's about to be proven wrong about something once again. Akasaka tells Rika that she should be happy her prediction about the dam being cancelled came true because now peace can return to the village.
Peace in this village? Even though every year from now on, something bloody will occur?
Rika-chan, what are you talking about?
You see, in a few years, I'll be killed.
What? Throughout this chapter, Rika has been predicting things that are going to happen. All of them have turned out to be correct, but each one has been explained away by her having insider knowledge about the events from the 3 families, but there's no way that even they'd know about that, right?
This day next year, yes, June 1979, on this day, the foreman of the dam construction project will be killed.
But be killed? What makes you think...
The next year, in June of 1980 on this day, Satoko's parents will be pushed to their deaths. And then, the year after that, this day in June of 1981, my parents will be killed. And then, the year after that, this day in June of 1982, Satoko's abusive aunt will have her head split open and die. And then, the year after that, this day in June of 1983, or possibly a few days afterwards, I will be killed.
Akasaka immediately comes to the conclusion that all these deaths are preordained by the Sonozakis, but we know that that can't be the case, because the Sonozakis didn't kill Satoko's aunt. Satoshi did. That was one of the major things we learned last chapter, and now it's being used to thoroughly disprove Akasaka's analysis. And yet, even he sees the flaws in his thought.
But that didn't explain what would happen in 1983. There was no way that the last death would fit in with anybody's plans.
Rika is beloved by all, isn't she? Why would they want her dead?
I want to live happily, surrounded by my precious friends, spending our days enjoyably. Only that. I don't wish for anything more than that. I don't want to die.
We don't know what is said after that. Akasaka doesn't tell us. All he does say is that they are soon discovered by some of the old-timers and have fun at the festival. The villagers seem not to care who he is, but he supposes now that the matter has been resolved, he's not really their enemy anymore. Eventually, Rika disappears, most likely to go to bed, and the old-timers get a car to take Akasaka back to the hospital. The guard on night duty admonishes him for wandering around and says that Oishi wanted to get in touch with him. But Akasaka thinks that it's far too late to call him, and whatever he has to say can wait until the morning. For now, it's time for him to go to sleep.
Papa? Are you there? Papa? Are you alright? Were you having a scary dream?
So remember how we started off this story with a whole framing device thing? Yeah, we're back, albeit briefly, in 1985. And Akasaka is about to meet up with Oishi for the first time since 1978. He's traveled all the way to Hokkaido with his 7-year-old daughter, Miyuki.
Akasaka-san! How many years has it been?
In the interim since we've seen them, Akasaka has moved up the ranks from rookie investigator, and Oishi has retired and is now primarily concerned with ballroom dancing. Never would have guessed! They go to a hot springs inn to chill out and catch up.
Did they end up catching those two guys?
Nope. In the end, the search team never found them. They were probably hidden by the villagers, then sent overseas or somewhere else far away to lay low for a while.
Nothing came of the gun that Oishi took from them either. The whole thing was very abruptly closed. Kinda sounds a lot like the other incidents.
What happened after that? Sure was tough, huh? It's been 7 years now?
Yeah. We held the memorial service a few days ago. I've become estranged from my father-in-law lately, so it was rough getting everything ready.
Wait. What's he talking about? The hostess interrupts to bring more drinks, but this gives Akasaka a moment to remember.
It was the day after, when I phoned Oishi to apologize.
The thing Oishi needs to talk to him about apparently can't be said over the phone, so Akasaka heads over to the station, thinking he must be really mad about Akasaka's escapades the night before. He could never have imagined what it was really about.
It seems your wife was involved in an accident.
According to a nurse, whenever Akasaka didn't call or visit her in the evening, Yukie had a habit of wandering up to the roof of the hospital.
On the evenings he didn't call. At the very least, she felt that standing underneath the same sky, her feelings would reach him.
But this time, she apparently slipped on the stairs on the way down and hit her head wrong. At first, Akasaka thinks this might be revenge from the OG, but try as he might to investigate, it really seems that it was just an accident. An extremely unfortunate accident.
At that moment, I remembered the words that girl had told me. That it was best that I go back to Tokyo right away. Otherwise, there would be something I'd regret horribly.
That was the reason for Rika's behavior. Why she tried so desperately to get him to leave, and the reason she cut the phone lines. At that point, Yukie was already dead, and it was an act of kindness meant to give him one last happy night. Akasaka tells all of this to Oishi, who seems thoroughly surprised, though he really shouldn't be, as he's the one who told Akasaka that Rika is the reincarnation of Oyashiro-sama.
Well, yeah. The old folks in the village believed that Rika Furude had divine powers. They said she did things like prophesize the future or talk about things she should have no way of knowing.
So, this is a thing that Rika has done many times before. Oishi tries to laugh it off and asks if Akasaka honestly believes it. Akasaka, of course, doesn't want to, but those times when Rika wasn't acting like herself still bug him. He can't help but see them as a warning that he ignored. But Oishi brings up, if Rika truly was a prophet, why didn't she predict the disaster? You know the one, the gas explosion from the last chapter. Either this chapter is in that same timeline, or this is meant to imply that it always happens. However, Akasaka doesn't have to ponder this for long, as Oishi has a possible explanation.
If Rika Furude, the reincarnation of Oyashiro-sama, was killed, then the village might have incurred the god's wrath, making him call forth the miasma from the swamp to kill everyone. That explanation is what the survivors are whispering about.
Sorry, Oishi-san. Did you just say she was killed?
Oh, he didn't know. Akasaka clarifies that he of course saw her name in the list of victims, but he just imagined she died like everyone else, not that she was killed beforehand. So now they truly get down to business. The reason they were meeting was to discuss the specifics of the last incident, as Akasaka doesn't know much about it since there was no way for anyone to report on what happened. Maybe we'll understand now which timeline this chapter takes place on, but nope, Oishi confesses that there wasn't much time to investigate, so he doesn't really know much about it.
A photographer by the name of Jiro Tomitake. He was the victim.
And then, of course, Takano went after him. However, according to Oishi, that's not the end of it. I haven't brought him up since he hasn't really been relevant, but this time around, Oishi's young partner, Kumagai, went missing in the middle of the investigation. So, yeah, it turns out we're on a timeline that's completely different from any of the others. God, this is getting complicated.
He got too close to the truth and was made to disappear?
Oishi concurs. Apparently, Dr. Irie died in this timeline as well, from an identical cause to the last chapter. Rika's death was also very similar, although this time she was found next to the donation box instead of inside it.
What we know is that she was rendered unconscious by some sort of drug, carried to that place, then had her abdomen sliced wide open.
Unconscious? Then she wasn't cut open after her death?
Jesus Christ, Homegirl was cut up while she was still alive. Holy shit! Akasaka wonders how much about her own death she knew.
Knowing that her days were numbered and unable to fight the tide of events heralding her end. My heart ached at her helplessness.
Oishi mentioned some of the stuff we learned back in Chapter 2 about the history of the Watanagashi, but how that cutting open Oyashiro-sama's reincarnation would be sacrilege, and thus call down his wrath. Apparently, the part about Oyashiro-sama calling up miasma if he was angry was also part of the folklore, a part that we just hadn't heard yet. Of course, Oishi doesn't actually believe this. What he does believe is that a fanatical sect of the villagers contrived the events to make it look like the wrath of Oyashiro-sama. They go over a couple of theories as to how they could actually pull the final murder of an entire village off in one night, but nothing really sticks yet. Akasaka asks Oishi what he thinks of the events of those 5 years, and when Oishi lays down the official stance of the police department, Akasaka confesses everything.
Coincidence? The girl predicted everything from the beginning.
Girl?
Rika Furude. That child warned me about all the incidents that would happen afterwards.
Again, being men of reason, neither of them believe that she's actually a prophet. The conclusion they've come to is that the script for the events of murders were written a year before the events even started. But if she knew that her death was a part of it, why didn't Rika try to run away? They wonder if she didn't have the means to, since her family was all dead. So had she just given in to the fact that she was going to be a sacrifice?
There's no way that was the case. She had definitely said that she wanted to live happily. She hadn't given up on life. She had hoped to keep on living.
And here's where he catches up. Rika was, of course, asking someone for help. She was asking him. Oishi goes to get a pen and paper, and Akasaka stands and looks out the window.
She had made it clear as day that she didn't want to die. Wasn't that her cry for help?
And that is the true reason she cut the phone cords. Before he found out about his wife's death, Rika needed to ask him for help. But he didn't listen.
If only I was there in June of 1983. I could have protected her.
Rika was right about everything. If he'd taken her advice, Yukie would still be alive, and then he could have returned to save Rika. But he didn't, because he didn't believe her. And so she was killed.
A lone girl, without anyone to rely upon, unable to seek help, had to swallow her own predetermined death, and left this mortal coil. God damn it!
Of course, 5 years later, experienced and no longer green, he could have helped her. He could have saved her. But he had no idea what was happening. And now, it's all over. There's nothing he can do. The entire Hinamizawa area is still quarantined after the disaster. Oishi returns and sees that Akasaka is crying. He asks if he's alright.
I never realized! She wanted help! But it's all too late now! She was killed! In such an atrocious manner! She was counting on me, but I couldn't save her. I couldn't save her!
He falls to the ground.
Akasaka-san, does it upset you? Then, there's only one way worth mentioning for Rika Furude to have her revenge. In order to properly mourn the death of Rika Furude, we have to at least find out the truth. Lots of people died. Their lament must be immeasurable.
They agree right then. The two men will work together to find out the truth behind the incident. But just then, Miyuki, who has been in bed, hears them and enters the room.
What's wrong, Papa? Papa, why are you crying?
As she goes to pat him on the head, to comfort him, Akasaka sees a vision of another little girl overlapping with her.
Akasaka? Papa, please don't cry.
Miyuki, before you were born, Papa met a girl in Hinamizawa who was like an angel.
Miyuki says that she wants to meet this girl, and Akasaka agrees that someday they will. Someday when he finally solves this mystery. Akasaka and Oishi go on to write a book together about the incidents, and Akasaka chooses a very fitting title, Higurashi, When They Cry. He says this in the afterword.
Why did this tragedy happen? We can't reach the truth by ourselves. If you're reading this, please discover the truth. That is our only wish.
So, yeah. That's chapter 4. A little bit short, a little bit odd, occasionally even awkward, I'd say, in its delivery and pacing. It feels more like an experiment than anything. And I get the distinct impression that that's exactly what it is, especially once you know where the story is going from here. Regardless, this chapter shares something essential that's present in every other chapter, an emotional core so strong that it'll rip your heart out. There's always that sense of irony, in a way. Each chapter communicates this idea that had the characters known what was going to happen to them, had they attempted to reach out and communicate, to understand each other, things might have turned out differently. We'll have to see how that works out for them in the future. This chapter marks the end of the question arcs, even though I'd consider it more of a transition than anything else. Sure, a lot of questions were raised, but we actually had a fair bit of them answered as well. The vague suspicion we'd had on the Sonozaki family has grown very strong, and we now have several guesses as to how such a small organization might have pulled off the murders, sans the final town genocide, if non-supernatural is the direction you're leaning into for the answer. From here on out, we enter the answer arcs. We'll now be returning to the characters, concepts, and questions that were asked in the first half, and set about answering a fair portion of them. I will warn you, the rabbit hole is very deep. Are you prepared to see some shit? Really? Good. Then snuggle right in and prepare yourself for when we return, and make sure to get some sleep tonight. Special thanks go out to my Priests of the Hog and my Elder Hog Prophets, Adra, Chronoton, Xavier Pena, Ventus Agri, Casey N. Moore, Eshok7, and Jonathan Hummel. Thanks as always for your support.
You did it!
You know what it was?
What?
It was blue.
It's because it was blue?
Yeah, it was blue.
Oh my god.